Yes, guys, what's going on? It's Spess here. We've got a bunch of huge Gwent news today. Reddit's sort of losing their mind because there's been the CD Projekt Red Group Q3 2021 earnings report, and there's quite a lot of information about Gwent here. Now, the Reddit is very negative because Reddit has been basically linked with this single image that we are going to cover. However, it's really important for us actually to look at the whole presentation. As you can see, this is a slide on here, but there's other slides in this slideshow that do relate to Gwent, which are really important because it gives this other slide more context. Reddit has only seen this one slide and is kind of losing their minds, feeling very negative about it, but personally I'm feeling quite positive having read all of this information. So we've been looking at a bunch of different articles as well, because there's actually two really key parts of Gwent news. There's not only this part we're going to look at, but there's also news about the Gwent consortium and GOG basically being associated with that, which we're going to dive into as well. So lots to cover, but first and foremost, let's look at this very first slide that is here, and it's basically, this is the the CDPR development team allocation. So this is December last year, this is June, and then this is September. Now, the yellow part is Cyberpunk with the next gen version. The green is what we're interested in. It's Gwent-related projects. Interestingly, it doesn't just say Gwent. It says Gwent-related projects. I think it's safe to assume this Golden Necker project is part of that. Also, quite interestingly, which we'll cover in a little bit, it does seem as though GOG has until this point, which has changed, part of the Gwent consortium. So this Gwent consortium, GOG is seemingly part of, and is now going to be no longer by the end of the year. So we could actually see a big decrease in the next one of these reports in the size of the Gwent team, Gwent-related projects, but that would be the GOG consortium, part of the consortium. So a little bit confusing there, but what can we get from this? Well, it's important to remember that this is the proportion of the people that work at CDPR, but I think it's fair to assume that they haven't been laying a bunch of people off. There's been lots of job adverts, obviously, with Cyberpunk. I think laying people off at this time after the release of Cyberpunk would not make much sense. So I think we can safely assume if the Gwent size of the graph goes up, then it would mean that more people are working on Gwent. Now, Detective Specie here has done that exactly. As you can see, this is the first little size of the Gwent one in December, this is June, and this is September. So we're seeing a gradual increase in the proportion of the CDPR workforce that is working on Gwent-related projects. Now that could of course be related to Golden Necker. Obviously this whole fact that GOG is part of the Gwent consortium also maybe definitely murkies the water a bit. But this can only be seen as a positive thing, right? We're seeing an increase in the size of the Gwent team. Again, proportion doesn't necessarily equal quantity, but I think it's fairly safe to assume that there are more people working on Gwent-related projects now than there were back in December. That can only be a positive thing. That is definitely not a negative thing. Okay, cool. So this is the other big part and the part that Reddit's kind of losing their minds about, but now that we've seen the earlier slide, we have a lot more context to look at this. So this is a slide on the future plans of Gwent the Witcher card game. So there's 4 key points here. Let's talk about each one and just break them down. First and foremost, optimization of Gwent operations based on developed technology and experience gained over the last 5 years of operating the game. This is just quite a logical thing to be doing, optimizing the operations of the game, because if you optimize the operations, you have the perfect amount of people working on it to make the most money, right? The most profit possible. So this just makes a lot of sense. They're trying to optimize the operations of Gwent to continue Gwent having a healthy profit, which is obviously only a good thing for the game. If they can optimize as well as possible, if they can perfectly optimize rather, great, then the game is going to have a very successful future because it's going to be making a bunch of profit. That can only be a good thing. So also not really too surprising to hear this when we've seen obviously a big change in Gwent over the last 5 years. We saw it in beta, we had the midwinter thing, we had more recently, we've had journeys, and then we've had single card drops of Alza and Maddock recently, which I think were a great success. We have also seen a different take on expansions, which have been less of a success, and that's sort of also evident through the average monthly viewers on Twitch. May 2021, which was pre-expansion, it was looking really good. The expansion month, a big boom, but then even though this was still part of the expansion month where there was every 2 months a card drop, you can see that it actually had some of its worst performance in a year, or certainly in 2021, despite there being very little content and or at least definite expansions. We did have this whole leader card drop, and we know we've got another one of those coming soon. And that seems to be really successful. So I think we can expect to see more of that. And my anticipation, I don't have any inside knowledge of this, is we're going to continue to see card drops like Sunset Wanderers, Madoc, Alza to freshen up the meta. We might have like more leader card drops with famous cards such as the one we've got coming up just next week in December. And then we might go back to a more historic, words are hard, like traditional, there we go, take on expansions. So that would be my expectation, maybe 2 expansions a year, something like that, as well as the card drops. Now the expansions might be smaller than the one we just had. I would say maybe like 2/3 of the size. So basically, if you think of the single card drop we had, put 2 of those together, and that's an expansion, right? I could maybe see that, but just release them all at the same time. But then in between those, you can have little card drops, right? I think that's probably the biggest thing, right? That they need to add these bigger card drops as well as the smaller content updates, which is not just balance, but also the thing we've got coming up soon. I think that's a really positive approach. And bear in mind, this is the optimization of Gwent operations based on the developed technology and experience gained over the last 5 years. That would seem, based on the fact that we've got another small card drop coming in December, that is the area they're moving towards. But I also think that there's clear evidence that the big expansions were more successful than the broken down expansion, just based on the Gwent viewing figures, which is our best idea of seeing how the game's performing. We don't have access to how many people are playing, but there's of course a correlation between the amount of people watching the game and playing the game, and there's of course a correlation therefore between the amount of people watching the game and the amount of people spending money on the game. There's not, it's not going to be a definite correlation, but there's definitely a correlation there. I think it's, just quite obvious that is the case. So that's the best way we can look at it. Up next, the scale of activities and team size has been adjusted to achieve optimal results. Now, Reddit is looking at this with a very negative outlook. Because if the team is being adjusted to achieve optimal results, that is a bad thing. There's going to be less content and there's going to be less people working the game. I definitely have a different take on this, particularly when, we've got the context of the previous slide, which strongly suggests that there is in fact more people working on Gwent throughout the year, and certainly a bigger proportion of the CDPR workforce working on Gwent than there was. That is just a fact, right? That is just very clear. Now again, there's this whole thing with GOG that we're going to get onto afterwards, where GOG is being considered part of the Gwent consortium, so you could argue that it's just more people working on GOG and not necessarily Gwent. But there's obviously Gwent related projects as well, which doesn't necessarily just include the game we're playing right now, right? Like there's got the whole Golden Necker stuff, whatever's going on there. Clearly that's going to be quite a big deal, and why it doesn't just say Gwent projects, Gwent related, right? So that's something else to point out on. So listen, Reddit has seen this. Bear in mind they've just seen this image as being very, very negative. If we just click on this with the link, bear in mind it's just this image, team size adjustment, and it's got like a little poopy emoji. This guy's pooped his pants. He's looking a little bit nervy. But when we look at this, I think it's quite clear that this is not necessarily true. And in fact, the evidence would suggest that the team is being scaled up. I would also point to the fact that the biggest weakness of Gwent right now is, and has been for the last 6 months, has been the balance, right? The card design, I think, has been fantastic. I think that the art has been brilliant. Okay, there's been, there was a little bit of drama with the Aretusa student as an example, where there was maybe a step back in the art, but they've also come out and said that they want to make sure that doesn't happen again. The art has been fantastic on the journeys. I think if you look at the most recent journey with the music and some of the art styles, just absolutely fan-bloody-tastic. So what has been the biggest weakness of Gwent? Why is it that we've maybe seen like a negative downturn? Well, I think it was the balance within this most recent expansion that was not up to scratch, right? It just wasn't, with things like relics, and they're just being, even today, still Nilfgaard and NR just only having really one viable deck because there's so many auto-include cards. So in my opinion, it would be optimizing the performance of the game to get more people playing it, and therefore more people watching it, more people spending money on the game. It would be optimal for the performance of the game, for the best results, to slightly increase the team size. It just would, right? That's my opinion. I'm not an expert, But if you can improve the balance of the game, which you can do by getting more people working on balance as their core focus, you will improve the quality of the gameplay, which has been the biggest weakness of Gwent. I don't think anyone's got any problems with the art direction of Gwent. I don't really think people have got a massive issue with the card design in Gwent. It's just maybe the balance and how some of those cards have been implemented. But there's been a bunch of really fun cards. Look at Witch's Sabbath as an example, right? Some of the card design we've seen recently has been just really, really, really exciting cards, but maybe the implementation of them hasn't always been perfect. And in my opinion, a few more people working on balance is going to definitely improve the optimal results. So I don't think this is a negative. That was my impression when I first saw this. Bear in mind, though, when I first saw this image, I did see this exact thing. I saw this first. And I think the context of this definitely supports my argument and would go against what Reddit is thinking, that like one of the most ominous sounding phrases in the English language right there. This is not a Gwent release. This is just CD Projekt Red's financial results release, right? They're not talking to the Gwent community here. They're talking to people that have got shares, for example, in CDPR, right? So yeah. Third point. So far, positive in my most humble of opinion. Third point. Further support for the project with regular updates and content drops, guys. Further support. Cool. This is just another good thing. Does further mean more? Not necessarily. No. Further does not necessarily mean more. But listen, again, it's only a good thing. Just to touch on as well, because I've seen Silex ask in the chat, what's Spocko? Spocko is a development team that CD Projekt Red basically took in, and they work on the Monster Slayer game, as Tankoff has said, yeah. And then finally, a detailed roadmap of the 2022 releases to be presented during Gwent Masters Season 3 finale on December 5th. That's this weekend, guys. I'm going to be there. Cool. There's going to be a big segment that's going to be covering the roadmap then, and plans for the future. We know obviously we've got this 12 card drop. I think it's 12 cards coming out just next week. So we're going to be getting leaks for that. And then we're also going to be getting a roadmap. So look, this is just only a positive thing in my most humble of opinions. Reddit, of course, has different opinions, but I do also think that it's really important that to realize that they didn't have the context of evidence suggesting that the size of the Gwent team has in fact increased this year. Cool. Now, I am going to show you the second piece of news which relates to Gwent, which is pretty damn interesting. It doesn't relate to this release of info, but it does have definite bearings to Gwent. And I would imagine it's come out at the same time, because basically there's an interview with the head of GOG, I want to say, CD Projekt Red CFO, which I don't know exactly what that is. CFO chat will help us and I'll update you. Anyway, as GOG posts a year-to-date loss, CD Projekt Red pledges to bring it back to basics. So basically, within the last 12 months, GOG has made a loss. So it's their financial head. Cool, thank you. CD Projekt will be reorganizing GOG to focus on its core business activity following news that it's been losing money. It launched in 2018 as Good Old Game, 2008, and has basically been more recently a conventional online game store like Steam and Epic Games, but hasn't exactly been doing well because it's operated at a loss. During a presentation on CD Projekt's quarter-3 revenue for 2021, however, it was revealed that GOG is losing the company money with year-to-date losses of $2.1 million. Wow, that's a lot of money, compared to a year-to-date gain of $1.37 million during the same period last year. To fix this, CD Projekt CFO Piotr, apologies for not being able to pronounce his surname, Niulu Bałek, I'm so sorry, that was awful, stated during the presentation that GOG was going to see some organisational changes that would return it back to what made it popular in the first place. Now, this does get relevant to Gwent. Regarding GOG, its performance does present a challenge, and recently we've taken measures to improve its financial standing. First and foremost, we've decided that GOG should focus more on its core business activity, which means offering a hand-picked selection of games with its unique DRM, chat, what's DRM mean? Free philosophy. Sorry, philosophy. I'm sure he didn't say philosophy. In line with this approach, there'll be changes in the team's structure. According to Piotr, Mr. Piotr Niolobałek, some GOG developers who've been working on online solutions will be transferring to other parts of the company. Interesting. This is where it gets really big. GOG will be leaving the Gwent Consortium. Gwent Consortium, guys. The hell? CD Projekt has been running with numerous departments based on the Witcher card games spin-off Gwent. This means that it will neither bear its portion of expenses nor obtain the corresponding shares of revenues associated with this project. So basically, at the moment, GOG is part of the Gwent Consortium. And the reason for this is, I've done some digging, is basically, I don't have it pulled up unfortunately, is basically GOG became part of the Gwent Consortium back in, I want to say like 2017, 2018, around that time. And that's because Gwent was making GOG a bunch of money because people were buying cosmetics. Now, bear in mind, again, if we look at Gwent, back then, Gwent was a more popular game. It just was. Homecoming was catastrophic for the success for Gwent. And even though it's been released on mobile since, the average viewership has, not counted up. But obviously, it's got a more casual player base. But that means the more hardcore player base were playing on PC, of course, and therefore using GOG to make their purchases. That is obviously not going to be the case anymore because probably the majority of the purchases that are made on Gwent are the more casual audience, and that is done through people that are playing on mobile. There's been a big shift, on the focus of Gwent. Before, it was people playing on PC, and now it's people playing on mobile. So it makes sense that GOG was sort of linked somewhat with the Gwent Consortium because the majority of the money, I think the majority of the profit that GOG was making was actually due to microtransactions within Gwent. Cool. So, basically, they are now separated, which is really, really interesting. And there's this quote. There is this quote that basically mentions that. I'm getting very flummoxed. But yeah, basically that GOG and Gwent are going to be separated, which also, like as mentioned previously, like will that have an impact on this? Is this part of the Gwent-related projects? How much of this is GOG if GOG is considered a Gwent-related project? We'll have to keep an eye on that. It's definitely something to explore. If anyone's got any inside information, please let me know, and I'd be really interested to talk to you just to try and get some more information out to the community. Also in the comments, if there's anything that you know about this that you think is really interesting, let me know. Probably going to wrap up there because I've been rambling for like 17 minutes. But listen, Reddit's a little bit upset, but I think when you bear in mind the context that we've got here, I don't think it's really a big deal. And also just to touch on this, does this mean that Gwent is failing? Because GOG is leaving the Gwent Consortium? No, it's quite the opposite. It actually means that GOG is the thing that's failing and they want to separate Gwent from GOG. Probably, again, because Gwent has moved more towards a mobile, where its revenue's being made on mobile as opposed to GOG. And it's also quite possible that some of the people that are working in GOG on the Gwent Consortium could chip in and help with Gwent, certainly on like back-end issues, like with the store and stuff like that. Whereas it's quite likely that if there's people that have been doing a lot of work on GOG Gwent for a long time, that they might just join the Gwent team, right? So yeah, I think overall, is this a positive financial presentation for Gwent? I think it's really positive. We've got confirmed as a roadmap, so at least we've got another year at the very least. And all of these are positive points. They're saying they're going to optimize it. Good. They're going to say that the scale of activities and team size is going to be adjusted to achieve optimal results, guys. Optimal results is good because if you can achieve optimal results, that means the game will last for as long as possible, right? Optimal results equals the longest possible time that Gwent will be a successful game. That's a good thing, okay? This does not necessarily mean that there's going to be less activities and less people. This means that they are going to adjust the activities and adjust the team to achieve the optimal results, okay? This is not a Gwent press release. This is a CD Projekt Red earnings financial release for their shareholders, right? Further support, good, for the project with regular updates and content drops and a detailed roadmap of 2022, which we get on Sunday. Great. Guys, I think this is positive. Am I the only one? Or having seen this, would you agree with me that Reddit is not quite got the right end of the stick? And in fairness to them, it's because they only had this as the context, right? They didn't have the other stuff to go along with it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want to see more of this kind of video, let me know. If you watched this far, make sure you liked it. I'd appreciate it. And comment down below. I'm really interested in having a little discussion over what you guys think. Certainly about Do you guys agree with me? And also, what do you guys think the Gwent Consortium is all about? Have you heard this phrase before? Done a little bit of digging, and as I said, GOG got added to the Gwent Consortium in like 2018, 2017, when Gwent was making a lot of revenue, and it's now leaving. But what do you guys think is the Gwent Consortium exactly? Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and see you on the next one, mate. Bye.